The 1st century CE marks a time of rebellion and religious war between Rome and the Roman province of Judea that will come to define the era in Roman history. The first imperial dynasty of Rome, the Julio-Claudians, will be replaced by the Flavians. Rome will be burnt to the ground by Jewish Christians, and Jerusalem, along with its temple, will be utterly destroyed by the Roman legions. This conflict, which is reported to result in the deaths of millions of lives, will spill over into the first half of the 2nd century before it finally comes to an end. Right in the midst of this war, we see the birth of New Testament Christianity, centered around the character of Jesus Christ. This figure, and the religion so famously associated with him, will become the most significant religious phenomenon of the next 2,000 years for Rome and the Western world. During the century leading up to the Jewish rebellion against Rome, Judea is a semi-autonomous kingdom ruled by the Jewish royal family the Hasmoneans, also known as the Maccabees. The Hasmoneans had wrested control of Judea from Greek rule a century earlier in the Maccabean Revolt, famously commemorated to this day in the annual celebration of Hanukkah. The Hasmoneans are hardline Jewish nationalists who conquer the rest of Palestine and enforce strict adherence to Jewish religious law throughout the region. In the mid-1st century BCE, Roman general Pompey the Great, taking advantage of civil conflict within the Hasmonean ruling family, conquers Jerusalem, and Rome takes control of the region. Judea becomes a Roman protectorate, and Rome appoints a governor to oversee the area. The Hasmoneans maintain their monarchy in earnest, but they are soon politically outmaneuvered by their cousins, the Herodians from the southern Judean region of Idumea. The Herods are willing clients of Rome, and a few years later, Herod the Great is declared king of Judea by the Roman Senate. Herod is a shrewd political operator who rules with an iron fist, maintaining his rule through the control of Roman military forces stationed in Jerusalem. They allowed the establishment of Roman colonial cities in Palestine and acquiesced to Roman cultural influence in the region, in stark contrast to their xenophobic Hasmonean predecessors. Herod maintains his kingship for 4 decades before dying of an unknown disease at the turn of the 1st century. In the year 6 CE, due to political instability caused by Herod's death and the ascension of his inexperienced sons to rulership, in an attempt to stabilize the region, Rome declares Judea an official Roman province, establishing a more hands-on governing of the area, including direct taxation. The responsibility of governing the province is given to the governor of Syria, Publius Sulpicius Quirinius, who is tasked with the implementation of Roman taxation and regulation of the region. Quirinius orders a census be taken of the population, in preparation for the implementation of a Roman property tax. Nationalist Jews, led by a figure known as Judas the Galilean, who are unhappy with this new encroachment by their Roman overlords, animated by scriptural prophecy, instigate a violent revolt in an attempt to disrupt the census. They preach against paying taxes to Rome, destroy property, and even kill Jewish participants. This tax rebellion is credited by contemporary historian Flavius Josephus as giving birth to the Fourth Way, a fourth distinct religious sect of Judaism he refers to as the Zealots. These are the progenitors of Jewish Messianism, or Jewish Christianity. These Jewish Christian zealots are militant nationalists with a hardline stance of strict adherence to Orthodox Judaism. They are inspired by a Jewish scriptural prophecy predicting the coming of a savior or hero anointed by God who will liberate the Jews from their Roman rulers. It is prophesied that this Christ will lead the Jews to victory politically and militarily, eliminate Rome's influence and corruption of the Jewish culture, and establish a Jewish empire ruled from Jerusalem. The rebellion continues. In the year 19 CE, as a result of Jewish Christians in Rome coming into cultural conflict with the native Roman population, all Jews who do not renounce their faith are expelled from Rome by senatorial decree, backed by the recommendation of Emperor Tiberius. Under Emperor Caligula, Major conflict erupts between the Jews and the Greek and Roman populations in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. Alexandria is the largest and most important Roman city outside of Rome itself. The Jews are accused of not honoring the emperor. Synagogues are destroyed, Jewish homes are plundered, and many Jews are killed, some by crucifixion. In a direct insult to Jewish law and tradition, Emperor Caligula orders the construction of a statue of himself styled as the Roman god Jupiter to be erected within the Jewish temple walls in Jerusalem. The protests by the Jewish people are so strong that despite the threat of being sentenced to death as punishment, the Roman official who is sent to undertake the project relents and fails to complete the statue. During the reign of Emperor Claudius in the 40s and early 50s CE, there is a report of another expulsion of the Jews from the city of Rome by the emperor himself. This expulsion is a result of continual disturbances by Jewish Christians within the city. Under Emperor Nero, tensions between Rome and Judea come to a head. In 64 CE, a fire breaks out in Rome, now known as the Great Fire of Rome, that destroys most of the city. The emperor places the blame for starting the fire on Jewish Christians, and has many of them publicly tortured and executed as a result. The Great Fire leaves Rome and Emperor Nero in severe financial trouble, needing the funds to rebuild the city. Nero sends his representatives to Jerusalem to enter the sacred Jewish temple and pilfer its famous stores of gold riches. There is no greater insult to the tradition of the Jews, and in less than 2 years we will see the outbreak of all-out religious war between Rome and Judea, led by Jewish Christian zealots, inspired by messianic prophecy on one side, and the soon-to-be-crowned imperial family of Roman generals, the Flavians, on the other. Emperor Nero is in deep financial trouble as a result of the Great Fire of Rome, which he blames on Jewish Christians. He sets his eyes on the gold within the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Nero appoints Gessius Florus as procurator of Judea, a man who he knows to hold sufficient contempt for Jewish culture and tradition, and mandates him to take by any means necessary the contents of the Jewish temple treasury. As a result of this insult, tensions now boil over, and ethnic conflict erupts throughout Palestine between the neighboring Greek and Roman populations and the native Jews. The Jews, led by the Jewish Christian zealots, desirous for war and seeking liberation, seize the opportunity and escalate the conflict. Rome deploys its legions to Judea in the year 66 AD. Cestius Gallus, the Roman senator and proconsul of Syria, along with King Herod Agrippa, who fled Jerusalem at the onset of the Jewish uprising, begin their march on Galilee and Judea with a force of 30,000 men in an attempt to quell the rebellion. They arrive at the gates of Jerusalem, but they have underestimated the levels of animosity held by the people in the city, with the high priests now having thrown in their lot with the Jewish Christian zealots. The Romans gambled that such a show of force would result in a negotiation and the resolution of tensions. The Jews refused to talk. Unprepared for a siege, and with the onset of winter approaching, the Romans opt to return to Syria and prepare to undertake an all-out siege of the city when the cold weather abates. The Jews ambush the Romans during their retreat and slaughter as many as they can. The ball is now rolling, and all-out war between Rome and Judea is now inevitable. The Roman historian Flavius Josephus records in his book, The Jewish War, what did most elevate the Jews in undertaking this war was an ambiguous oracle that was also found in their sacred writings. How? About that time one from their country should become governor of the habitable earth. This prophecy Josephus is referring to is the prediction of a coming Jewish Messiah or Christ. We will take a detailed look into this prophecy in the next video. Emperor Nero appoints the experienced Roman general Titus Flavius Vespasianus, commonly known as Vespasian, to take over operations in Galilee and Judea from the Syrian proconsul. General Vespasian is accompanied by his son Titus, as well as several other significant figures of history, including the father of Emperor Trajan and Tiberius Alexander. Vespasian gathers 4 Roman legions, as well as auxiliary forces in southern Syria, and marches on Galilee. At this show of force by the Romans, many of the common Jewish folk of the area capitulate and welcome the Romans in, overwhelmed by fear of the mighty Roman war machine. The Jewish Christian rebels do not relent, and many of the common Jewish folk find themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. The defining battle of Vespasian's Galilean campaign comes at the fortress of Jotapata, where the Jews are led by the figure now so important to history, Joseph Bar Matthias. Josephus, the leader of the rebellion in Galilee, has been cornered in the fortress of Jotapata. Vespasian leads the Roman legions in a long and bloody siege before finally overcoming the valiant Jewish defense. Josephus surrenders and hands himself over to the Romans. At the request of his son Titus, Vespasian spares Josephus's life. Josephus accompanies the Flavian generals during the rest of their campaign in Judea and aids them as a translator and confidant. After the war, he is freed by Vespasian, takes the name Flavius Josephus, and goes to Rome and works for the Flavians as their court historian. Once the siege of Jotapata is wrapped up, many of the remaining Jewish Christian zealots retreat to Judea. Vespasian marches to the far side of Galilee to help Agrippa stabilize and take control of Gamala and the east. Once that is complete, Vespasian retires to his winter quarters in Caesarea on the coast and plans the invasion of Judea and the siege of Jerusalem. The Roman strategy is to subdue and garrison the outlying areas before finally besieging the walled city where the majority of the rebels are held up. Before Vespasian can get to Jerusalem, his attention, as well as the attention of the entire Roman world, is diverted to the outbreak of civil war in Rome. Nero has died by suicide. His death marks the end of the Julio-Claudian imperial dynasty, and the fate of the Roman Imperium is in flux. A violent and bloody civil war breaks out in Rome between warring factions with claims to the throne. The faction of the army loyal to Vespasian eventually take control of the city, and Vespasian is declared emperor. At this time, Vespasian is in Alexandria, Egypt, in council with the Roman Jewish family of the Alexanders. The Alexanders are abelarchs and Roman tax collectors in Alexandria, and likely the richest family in the empire. The Alexanders throw their weight behind Vespasian's bid for the throne, solidifying his claims of emperorship. At this point, Vespasian's presence is required in the city. He departs for Rome and sends his son Titus back to Judea to take control of the army and lead the siege of Jerusalem. Titus is to put an end to the war in Judea. Titus leads the Roman forces to the walls of Jerusalem. He encamps himself and his legion on the Mount of Olives. The walls of Jerusalem are a formidable defensive structure and prove difficult to penetrate. Titus orders the surrounding groves be cut down and used to construct a wall encompassing the city in order to cut off the Jewish Christian zealots' supply lines. Severe famine sets in, and chaos ensues. But the Jews refuse to surrender. The full weight of the Roman war machine is then brought down upon the city, and after a long, brutal siege, the city is destroyed and the Jewish temple is razed to the ground. Judea and Palestine have been laid waste, and Jerusalem is in ruins. The Jewish temple has been utterly destroyed, and the Jewish Christian zealots are now forced into hiding. The Roman Empire, having only known one imperial dynasty, has undergone a transition into a new and uncertain era under the victorious Flavians. Right at this time in history, we see the New Testament Gospels of Jesus' life being written. In the next video, we will take a deep dive into where exactly the ideology of Christianity comes from that inspired the Jews to rebellion. Where did it all start? Subscribe to the channel to follow along with us as we take this fascinating journey. Like the video and share your thoughts below.